This is a president who would rather find a peaceful way for the Iranian government to back off their ambition for a nuclear weapon. It's not a matter of, are they going to get one, maybe just a little smaller one? They're not going to get one. Can there be a way to avert an all-out war?
A Houthi ballistic missile built by Iran but fired from Yemen broke through U.S. and Israeli anti-missile defense systems and hit the grounds of Ben Gurion International Airport, our main civilian airport. So maybe we start there, just your reaction to these incredible videos of passengers and all being terrified by that explosion.
You know, it's sort of like everyday life in the world of an Israeli. Now, not every time a missile gets through. Most of the time, either the Arrows, the Iron Dome, or the THAAD missiles will intercept it, take it out. In fact, a little earlier this morning, we heard a loud boom. I was out in the backyard with my two little dogs, and I hear this boom. And it was miles from us, didn't even activate the Jerusalem sirens, but it gives you some idea of the small country. The sound of the boom was large, and it was a missile being intercepted. Then later, this one got through, and that's unfortunate because normally they don't. But no defense system is perfect. It's a very important reminder that Israel is under attack regularly from people who want to not just trouble them, but want to destroy them. Yeah. And it's part of the ethos of this incredible country that people have to wake up every day knowing that there are threats to their very existence.
Yeah, just over the last month we've had, I think this is the 26th missile that was fired at us just from Yemen. Again, most of them shot down by the U.S., sometimes by Israel. President Trump doing a great job at really unleashing, taking the gloves off and hitting the Houthis, but obviously there's a lot more work to be done to neutralize that threat, which brings us really to the larger threat, the head of the octopus, which is Iran. But as I just started a moment ago, Israelis are anxious because we were, I think, fairly certain that President Trump would come in and give a quick ultimatum, make a fast deal, or that's it. They've had all these years. But we're now engaged in this week-by-week process. And I think Israelis, and I think as time goes by, more evangelicals are thinking, okay, we do trust President Trump more than any American president, and certainly more than the last. But where's he going with this? Does he really trust the Iranians to cut a deal with him? What should we be knowing about what he's thinking and where he's going?
I would say listen to what he actually says. Don't listen so much to the New York Times and the Washington Post that would have you to believe that he's about to resurrect JCPOA 2.0 and go back and embrace the Obama policies. He was the one that got rid of JCPOA in his first term. He's been very clear. The Iranians are not going to have a nuclear weapon. That's not on the table. There's no negotiation about that part of it. Two things I think people need to kind of look at in the big picture. One, this is a president who would rather find a peaceful way for the Iranian government to back off their ambition for a nuclear weapon. It's not a matter of, are they going to get one, maybe just a little smaller one? They're not going to get one. That's one thing he has been consistent, never changed that, never hesitated to say it. Can there be a way to avert an all-out war? If so, this is a president who would rather have peace than war.
Yeah, well, I think you're going to have all evangelicals support that, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. That's what we want. But we have very, very high doubts over a long period of time, 50 years, that this regime or anyone like them would make a deal that we could.
Yeah, Joel, I don't think anybody believes that the Iranians will make a good deal unless they're doing it just to protect themselves, their regime. And if they make one, how do we ever believe they will keep it? 46 years the Ayatollahs have been in power. They've never made or kept a deal yet that somehow showed that they were willing to be good neighbors. They're terrible neighbors. They're the ones who have financed the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. The reason so many people got slaughtered on October the 7th is because you can say it was Hamas, and it was, but the check was written in Tehran. And if you look at even those missiles that came out, as you mentioned, those are really postmarked Tehran. The Houthis may have shot them, but they were first delivered to the Houthis from the Iranians. So we're not seeing any evidence that they're changing their ways, that the Leopard is getting rid of its spots. So I want to be clear about that. The president's message just last week when he was on the way to the funeral for the Pope, and he was asked by a reporter, are you going to let Israel drag the United States into a war? I loved his answer, because he said, nobody's dragging us into anything. If the Iranians don't understand they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, we won't be dragged into it. I'll be leading it. I'll make sure that they don't have it. I would say those kind of words and statements are much more the policy of the Trump administration than hearing somebody who is spouting off to the New York Times or the Washington Post, neither of which are going to ever give Donald Trump time of day and the benefit of the doubt.
Fair enough. But early on, you got Steve Witkoff, who's a very accomplished negotiator. In fact, we'll get to it later in the show. That he did a brilliant job getting the next round of hostages out, and we hope that he can do it again. But he does look stretched a little thin. He's trying to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, get all of our hostage out, deal with the Iranian portfolio, and the Iranian portfolio is a steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. His first statement, the first substantive statement, was that the U.S. was going to let Iran continue to enrich at, I think, 3.67% or something. That's JCPO numbers. That's why there is this talk of maybe we're going back. Now, he did retract that, but that seemed like a misstep that, it doesn't seem like Steve, but on the other hand, he's got a lot of things to cover. Is it too much? Is there any... There are some reasons to be concerned that maybe with everything going on, President Trump might take a deal that he wouldn't wish for, but he would be okay with. No?
I don't have that anxiety. I'm not seeing that. And I've talked to the president, I've talked to Steve Witkoff, I've talked to Marco Rubio. I'm not hearing anywhere in the administration that there's a willingness just to get a deal to have a deal. And I think increasingly there's a clear understanding that the Iranians can't, do some shucking and jiving on this. They're going to have to get down to the bare bones. They're going to have to be willing to let inspections take place if anything happens. But I also believe the president would like to say, sort of to quote the words of a John Lennon song, let's give peace a chance. Now, peace may not have a chance in this, but if there has to be an all-out attack, I think the president wants to be able to say to the world, look, we did everything possible to achieve some positive result, diplomatically. But when diplomacy fails, the military steps in.
Okay, the president's coming. It's a big first international trip aside from paying his respects to Pope Francis, but he's not coming to Israel. So let's start there. You're the ambassador to Israel. Why isn't the president, who's the most pro-Israel president in history, why is he not coming here?
I mean, he spent an enormous amount of time with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington, and I think that right now he would love to see the Abraham Accords expanded. He would love to see a greater level of partnership within the region of the Gulf states. So it makes sense. He's had a strong relationship with the Saudis. They're a key to moving the Abraham Accords forward. So I think that's part of it. There's also some very significant economic opportunities that he's going to be dealing with and announcing on the trip. So he's going to three key strategic, I would say, allies of the region, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis. The Emiratis are already part of the Abraham Accords. They're a country that I have great respect for because they stuck themselves out there in the early days of the Abraham Accords, much to the chagrin of some of their neighbors. But it's proven to be an incredibly good relationship. And I had a visit with the ambassador from the Emiratis to Israel. They're extremely pleased with what has resulted in terms of economic activity. There's a lot more that can be done, and they're looking to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree. You may recall that one of the delegations of evangelical leaders that I led, that unfortunately, even though I invited you, just for the record, I did invite Mike, but
wasn't your fault.
No, exactly. But you had a full dance card. But we met with President Mohammed bin Zayed. He was the crown prince at the time, and it wasn't boilerplate. But I said to him, "Look, this is the first country that's invited us. You're the first leader that's invited us that." In the Arab world that doesn't have a peace treaty with Israel, and we're just looking who is going to be the next Arab leader to make peace. It's been at that point a quarter of a century after Egypt, after Jordan, and I just wanted to get it sort of on the record with him, and he said, "Joel, it's going to be me." And we were, all of us were like, what?
It's a newsmaker.
Yeah, and he spent the next hour explaining how his calculus had changed. He said that Israel's not the threat that we thought once, and that with all of us in the Arab world thought. It's Iran that's the threat. And that calculus shift changed everything, because we had agreed that was an off-the-record conversation at the time. So we walked out with this huge headline.
Yeah.
We didn't share it because, we gave him our word. But sure enough, it was just about 2 years, almost to the day, and he announced with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu that he was starting this Abraham Accords process, and it was really amazing. So but those Arab countries, I can tell you from personal conversations with MBS, MBZ, and the others, they're very worried about the Iran threat. So again,
they ought to be.
Is Iran part of the agenda? A briefing on what's going to happen and how President Trump is proceeding with these negotiations for these Arab leaders face to face, heart to heart?
Yeah, I'm not able to talk about what will all be on the table.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that you've assessed correctly that everyone in the region understands Israel is not their enemy. It just isn't. The real threat, the real enemy, the real danger, the outlier in all of this is Iran. And then that multiplies exponentially should they be able to obtain a nuclear weapon. Right. So they're a threat right now with their capacity with ballistic missiles and all of the just things that they have continued to build up. And people remember that Israel degraded their military pretty handily, pretty much took down their air support system. But the Iranians have been building rockets, missiles, and bombs every day as fast as they can since that happened. So if anyone thinks that they just stopped and quit building their inventory, they're quite wrong. And they're weaker today than they were when the attacks from Israel were launched to counter the attacks that Israel had had. But they're stronger today than they were yesterday, and they'll be stronger tomorrow. Time is of the essence.
So the other big element that certainly the Saudis want to hear, but all of the Arab states want to hear, is where are we going with Gaza, and aren't you going to make a Palestinian state? We can't really make peace with Israel, at least from Riyadh to Jerusalem, unless there's a Palestinian state. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Now, that's President Trump's position historically was a demilitarized Palestinian state. That was the deal of the century that he rolled out in January 2020. Where are we now? I mean, what is the president's position on a Palestinian state, given that Gaza has become, it almost effectively was a Palestinian state.
I was going to say, it was a
camp
Palestinian state. The people need to remember that the 10,000 Jews that lived in Gaza were all moved by gunpoint of the IDF. The Israeli army were the ones who moved the Jewish people out back in 2005. 2 years later, those people voted in Hamas to run the country, and it's been a disaster ever since. It was a de facto Palestinian state. When people say, we need a Palestinian state, I said, you had one. It's called Gaza. How'd that turn out? But I do think October the 7th changed everything. It changed it certainly inside of Israel. Israelis who were front and center, two-state solution, they're not talking about that anymore, because they see that the closer you let people who have been trained to hate you live next to you, it doesn't necessarily go well. So when people talk about a Palestinian state, my next question is, where is this going to be?
Right.
Does it have to be in Judea and Samaria? Does it have to be in land that Israel really has had claim to for 3,500 years? Or is it possible to say there'll be a Palestinian state, but it's going to be in a region that has some room? There just isn't that much room here. And I remind people, Muslim countries own 644 times the amount of real estate that Israel has. 644 times. Wow. So when people say, how come Israel doesn't give up some land? I'm thinking, why would they? Would any other country in the world who won the wars, would they do that?
But because the president is so determined to get a historic, I mean, this would be the ultimate game-changing mother of all peace deal.
It would.
The Saudi-Israeli deal with U.S. guarantees and so forth. But if the Saudis are saying we need a Palestinian state, and the president is skeptical at best, and the team around him is pretty skeptical at best, how does one square that, and especially when he's making his first stop, Saudi Arabia?
I would just say stay tuned. Let's see. And the honest answer to that is, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody does. But if anybody can pull this off, it's President Trump. I've never seen anyone quite like him who's able to sit down with people who have a very hostile position, and by the time it's over, they're making a deal.
Yeah.
He's really good at this. He wrote the book on it, The Art of the Deal, and if it can be done, I don't know of anyone else who could get this done other than President Trump.